going to grab the stream link while people start filtering
Streaming
in. Yes, streaming in. Womp womp. And womp womp. I just heard myself. You probably heard me too. Grab the stream link, post it to Twitter. We've already been posting it on Twitter. You can see our bed behind us, our bedroom window. We were gonna sit there where I usually sit by the heater, but Travis made us move because the heater's on. But he fixed the hole. It's fixed. The hole, you know, the one I pointed out last time. He fixed it.
Well, I wouldn't call it fixed. It is covered because that's where the doorknob stop goes. So the doorknob stop has been reaffixed to the wall. Not with glue this time. I think there was glue on it.
Yeah, it came with a little sticky pad thing.
Yeah. So there's a screw and a washer, which is more secure. So should be good until it comes out, which is a bigger screw. It's drywall. It's versatile.
Okay. And we've got 2 people with us right now. Say hello.
Well, one of them is you.
Well, yeah. No, yeah, that's me. Yeah. That's right. Say hello, whoever's joining us. It takes people a few minutes to filter in, so I get it.
Right.
I'm going to check these couple of notifications. Okay. So we're going to do, I'll kind of give a rundown really quick of what we talked about last time, and then we'll jump into the reason for the live stream tonight. So last time we talked about pregnancy and birth in this crazy time of the world that we're in. And it was a really great conversation. I think we were at like an hour and 45 minutes or so. So just under 2 hours that we sat here and chatted. And lots of good questions. And I had some follow-up questions as well in the comments after the live stream. My makeup is looking funny on the camera. Oops.
You're not expecting us to be here for an hour and 45 minutes, are you? I was not. I was not expecting that. Well,
maybe.
I guess we'll see what happens.
Oh, thank you, Molly. Molly says my hair and makeup look nice. Thank you.
It does. And luckily, we mentioned this before. Luckily, I did get a haircut today also, because you could probably look on the Twitter feed for more recent pictures of me. I have been very unkempt with everything going on lately. So if I had been next to her with that former visage of yet just a few hours ago, it would not have been favorable for me anyway. I guess all the more for her. I don't know if she could look any better.
Oh, it looked even better. So we had a lot of questions and it was really great. And I had a few follow-up questions since then. One of them seems to have disappeared from the channel though, from the channel comments. So I don't know what happened to that. And I don't even remember what it was. I was planning on addressing it because it was kind of a longer, more complex question than could be answered in. And the person even said, for your next live stream, here's a question. And maybe it was on Twitter, but now I can't find that either. Anyhow, so one thing that came up in the follow-up comments on the other stream was about the glucose tolerance test. And I don't take them. And I've always monitored my blood sugar. I don't anymore, but I used to always monitor my blood sugar. And just on the off chance that I had some symptoms that I was diabetic during pregnancy, and I never have been. And so instead of going to take the glucose tolerance test, the thing I've always done is just pay attention via the sugars that dump into my urine with the test strips, and then also the getting a diabetic test strips and the little monitor, etc., and sticking myself, once a month, or if I had some additional thirsts or my skin was extra dry or something, that would kind of be an indicator to me to, well, maybe I should just check it out, and I would monitor it for like a week or so. So that's how I go about doing that, instead of going to go take that gross, outmoded glucose tolerance test. It's ridiculous. I don't know why they still make women do it when there are so much more efficient ways of paying attention to that and figuring out if a woman is diabetic without making her starve for hours on end before she drinks crazy gross orange sugar water. It's terrible. And it makes a lot of women really sick. So anyway, that's where that is. So
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, because we don't do
Luckily.
it. So let's see. And then we were going to recap.
I don't know if I was paying enough attention, but what is the point of that?
To see if you have gestational diabetes.
To see if you have gestational diabetes, and the point of that is
over sugar your body and figure out how your body handles it.
Okay, and
after you've been starving.
And why do we need to figure that out?
Well, because gestational diabetes can be problematic for you and your baby, so you have to just watch blood sugar levels, and just like a regular diabetic would. So there can be problems attached to it, but you can monitor whether or not, and you can figure out whether or not you've got it by taking your own blood sugar levels, just the same way a diabetic would do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's pretty, I don't know why they do it that way. So anyhow, so Christmas was good for us.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Well, Christmas is good for us.
Yes, Christmas is good for us.
Praise the Lord. It is the 5th day of Christmas.
Is it the 5th day?
It is, yes.
Okay.
The 1st was Friday.
I believe you.
Yesterday was the 4th, as I mentioned, as we were celebrating the Feast of the Holy Innocents, and today is the 5th day.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're keeping track, because I'm not. I'm just like Epiphany. Like, when is Epiphany? Oh, yeah. That's when Epiphany is, and that's the end of Christmas. But it's not really the end of Christmas, because the end of Christmas is Candlemas. But anyhow, Garcia family, yes, this is available for questions. Bring your questions. Totally happy to answer them. Our focus tonight is really going to be on, because some women have problems discussing home birth with their husbands. And so I thought it would be a good idea to bring Travis on to give the husband perspective, what helped him understand that this is totally okay and good for mom and baby. And yeah, so we're going to jump into that here. Want to talk, Sarah says, a nurse told me I had a reaction to the glucose syrup as I got a bad stomach issue afterwards. I was eating sugar-free during my pregnancy and then had that syrup and was super sick. Yeah, see, that's what I'm talking about. When you eat like a healthy diet and then they're like, starve yourself for however many hours it is. Was it like 6 or 8 hours before you're going to take this test? And then take this crazy artificial gross sugar water syrup. Ugh. Of course, your body, you're going to get sick. You're going to get sick and your sugars are going to spike and they're going to be like, oh yeah, you maybe have gestational diabetes. And so they make you come back and do another test. If they think, I mean, it's just nuts. Garcia's family says, how do you not become not fearful? I have had 5 hospital and I'm terrified of the pain. I mean, pain is inevitable. Right. And if you come at this, we talked about this briefly in the last live stream, the pain that we experience in childbirth, that goes back to the garden, right? And that's our punishment, is pain in childbearing. And you just like anything else said is a cross to carry, you offer it up and you offer that pain. I don't know. And I feel bad saying this because I've never, like, I have pain, but I've never had a lot of, I've experienced as a midwife women with really extreme pain. And I've heard lots of women explain how painful it was for them, but I haven't personally experienced it that way. I'm not saying it was cakewalk, because it wasn't, but it wasn't the insurmountable agony that some women come up with, or that they talk about. I do want to say, I do think that a lot of that pain and our inability to deal with it comes for two reasons. You say you have had hospital births. If you have been in the hospital and you've been induced, your pain is going to be more extreme for a couple of reasons. Some of them are psychological, and some of them are physical, because if you've been induced, you've got Pitocin, which I said in the last video is just a 1-2 punch. It doesn't build up like oxytocin does naturally. So as your body produces oxytocin, it's a slow buildup, and your contractions become more and more and more progressive as they come on, and the more oxytocin that floods your body. With Pitocin, you just get that big rush of Pitocin, and you have just crazy contractions from the start. And that's painful. That's legitimately painful. I experienced that in my first birth.
So there's no warm-up period.
Right. There's no warm-up to it. And then, so there's that part in a hospital birth. And then you also have, I don't think a lot of people are aware of this, because a lot of women are aware of this because we are so conditioned into this fear, and we are so conditioned to think that we need the hospital to give birth, that we ignore the fear, like, of being in a place that we aren't comfortable. So there is legitimate fear there. Do you understand? Am I explaining that well enough?
Well, I mean, we're talking about fear about the pain, and now you're talking about
the
unfamiliarity.
Right.
Is a different
they go
concept.
together though. But they go together though, and I think that the fear of pain and the fear of being in a place where you aren't necessarily comfortable go hand in hand. And I think that the one exacerbates the physical. Mm-hmm. And we overcome that by recognizing that we have been fed lies, that we have been dissociated from who we are as human beings. And we have been stripped away from, we talked about this last time too, the media concept of what pregnancy and what labor consists of is just fear, panic, fear. Oh my gosh, get me to the hospital now, the baby's coming, when you were just like brushing your teeth 5 seconds ago. That's not how birth works, And so we've got this from movies and television and whatnot inculcated into our brains, that it's supposed to be super painful, and that it's supposed to be an emergency, and that it's going to be trauma. So, you overcome that by, you really just have to rewire your brain, and stop listening to these cultural narratives about how your body is broken and how you need the doctors because they're your superheroes, and this medical hero narrative. We don't say the C word in this either.
So I don't know what you mean by that.
That the virus that shall not be named.
Oh, right. Yeah, we're gonna avoid that. I understand that. But so you mentioned that there are legitimate possibilities of a change of approach to childbirth, causing a change in the physical levels of pain.
Right.
That can be legitimate. Which you never know until you try it if that's really what is happening for a given person. But I guess I'd be curious, because you said you've attended many births. What was maybe the percentage or likelihood of a woman to have an extremely painful birth versus one that was maybe more similar to what your experience?
I would say most of them were more similar to my experience. Even the longer, more drawn out ones, more similar to my experience. So
it's difficult. It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
It's something that you're working through, and it's good to have somebody there with you, whether it's your husband or a midwife, as you've been, so that can help out a lot. But most of them are not excruciating, unbearable pain, like some women have described.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've attended women who are up and dancing and laughing and telling jokes, or just like kicking back and watching a movie while they're waiting for their baby, because they're just like, okay, I gotta go through this. The only way out is through, and they're excuse me, they're with people that they're comfortable with, in an environment that they're comfortable with. And so when the pain comes, they're just like, oh, this is rough. And you've seen me. I mean, I have moments where I'm like, it hurts, but it goes, you know, and thinking back in all of my births, I can't ever remember thinking this is never going to end. You know,
Right.
like I can't get through this. I can't do it. It has never been in my vernacular, but we've been so trained to think that we can't.
Right.
That a lot of women really think that they can't without it being excruciating or needing pain meds or whatever.
Well, yeah, and I think that, you know, you talked about the kind of the some of the interventions that cause the cascade of effects where things get more difficult for both the mother and the baby during childbirth. And that was something that was hugely instructive for me when I was preparing for having our first, when I read through, I think it was most prevalent in the Ina May Gaskin book. What was that one called? Ina May Gaskin's book,
well, gosh, a book of childbirth, is it?
No.
I'm gonna look it up.
But basically it talked about, you know, just a lot of different information about the medical practices, contrasting the traditional
Guide to Childbirth.
Okay, A Guide to Childbirth by
Yeah.
Anna May Gaskin. So
Yeah.
contrasting the more traditional, you know, ancient thousands of years old, you know, practice of midwifery and having babies at home unless there's something, you know, highly irregular happening or something, versus the more modern medicalized births that happen in hospitals, where there's all these different interventions that happen. And they talk about not only the difference in, which is really important, the difference in the hormone, the fake Pitocin that's being put into the body to induce, having a much different effect than the natural producing oxytocin. But then also there are a lot of other hormones that need to happen, or maybe it's mostly just the oxytocin, maybe there's others too, but the generation of that and the interaction of that hormone with the fetus, with the baby, that produces a kind of a shared signal on, okay, this is happening, this is what's happening, this is what needs to happen, because the baby has a role too. The baby's got to be, you know, coming out. The baby is active in all of that process. It's a huge event for the baby in the life of the baby, right? Is that coming out phase, and there's a chemical symphony that happens in all of that, and that gets stunted not only by the initial Pitocin hormone, but also by, if you get drugs, if you get an epidural, well, that's going to really shut off a whole bunch of those receptors that are supposed to be releasing those hormones. They don't get released. And then, I don't know, there's probably some of those natural pain blockers too, dopamine responses or something like that are supposed to help, that those aren't going to happen either. And of course, you know, an epidural has got a lot more pain blockers, but they're meant to just shut out all of the feeling, and they shut down a whole bunch more, you know, and that is understood to be what happens. And so then your body's not as involved in the process, and it's supposed to be. And so the blocking of that can have a very real physical feeling too.
Right. And I think that all of that contributes to, so Garcia family says is it a conscious thing you do personally, that giving it up to God? I think I think a lot is mental fear, but the labor is super painful. I have prayed so much, but I haven't been able to do it. Well, I mean, it's not going to go away. Like, the pain's not going to go away. You just have to know that it's going to end. You know, you have to understand that it's going to end. And there's a whole bunch of different birthing methods. Like, I know people who do hypnobirthing and totally are like, yeah, hypnobirthing is where it's at, or the Bradley method, or, you know, all of these different methods of pain management. And you have to really just find the way that works for you to get yourself through each one. And you just have to know that every contraction that comes is going to end. That's really all there is to it. Each one that comes is going to end. And that each one is just going to get you even closer. And then it also depends on, you said you had 5 hospital births. I'm sorry, Chicken Dance Johnny, I'm going to mute you. Time out for Chicken Dance Johnny because he's spamming the chat. And now I lost my train of thought. Oh, so your position. So in the hospital, more often than not, they've got you on your back. And we talked about this in the last stream too. They've got you on your back, and your baby and your contractions have to work against gravity. Whereas if you're standing up or you're squatting or you're sitting on a birthing stool or sitting on a toilet, you've got gravity helping you, and that really does help with the pain.
There's a lot of geometry there too, as far as how open is the cervix and the birth canal in those
and even your
positions.
pelvis too, like how open your pelvis can be during all of those positions. It's incredible how much more open your body is when you're upright rather than laying flat on your back for the doctor to be able to have the best perspective.
I think it's close to twice as open. There's twice as much room in the birth canal if you're vertical or squatting versus on your back.
So, I mean, think about trying to change it up in how you are. And if a hospital is insisting that you be on your back, I mean, like I said in the last stream, you're in charge. You hired them. They work for you. So they don't get to tell you that you can't be up squatting. If you have to squat on the bed yourself with the help of your husband or your midwife or whoever's there with you helping you, then do it. They're not in charge of you. You're just renting a room from them and asking them to catch your baby. Like, really, that's how I feel about it.
Because most of the time, birth isn't much harder than that. It shouldn't be. It doesn't need to be.
Sarah says, I think it's the fear, because of the fear of the unknown. My labor always slows down once I hit the hospital. I have very short labors, 1 to 3 hours active labor with my last 3 babies. Yeah, that's how I am too. Just really short labors. And you're absolutely right. So in the natural birth world, it's often said that the first intervention is walking into the hospital. And it is an instinctive thing for us to, it's a fight or flight shutdown response is what it is.
Most of them have really bright lights. That's really already jarring just in itself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you think about, if you've ever watched animals give birth, I've watched, I don't know how many animals give birth. If you try to move them from where they want to be, they stop laboring. They stop birthing. So, that's, Darcy's here. Hi, Darcy. We got your card. It's really pretty. So, I mean, animals just stop. They'll just stop birthing. If they're disturbed in any kind of way, if they're obviously once you get to a certain point, it's unavoidable that a baby's going to come out. But, when you have that shutdown, slow down response, it's because you're in an environment you don't want to be in. And I think that we really need to listen to that, honestly. And not enough of us do. Most of us just, we fall victim to the rhetoric that the hospitals want to tell us that, oh, well, your baby's slowing down. We've got to put you on continuous fetal monitoring now. Or they send you home and laugh at you, especially if you're a first-time mom. They laugh at you and say, oh, ha, 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 silly woman, you're not in labor yet because your labor stalled, because you walked into the hospital, because your body recognized that you don't want to be there. Right. Psychologically, you did not want to be there.
Sure. And I mean and right there, even in that moment, the way that the doctors and nurses might respond to even that situation can already make the birth and the pregnancy a more negative memory. And then you're less interested in going through it again at that point, which is really sad. It's devastating.
So if you have any questions about the specific topic we wanted to talk about tonight was husbands, and that's why we brought Travis in, because just allaying fears that husbands might have, how to talk to your husband about the possibility of having a home birth. And we did touch on that a little bit from my perspective last time, but touching on how to talk to him, how he can overcome some of his fears about it, and just about the trust bonds that have to be in place in order for you to come to a reasonable place together if home birth is really something that you want to make happen for your family. So if you have questions, throw them, but otherwise I'll just let you talk. I don't have a question specifically for you.
No, that's fine. So I think that there's a lot of great reasons for it. And we touched on a couple of them as far as like just understanding some of the details, because it's a more foreign concept to mainstream. So it wasn't something that I was familiar with until I met Tasha, and she walked me through some of it and gave me some things to read about well, this is what it entails, and this is why in most cases it ends up being a much better process and better results, and better for everybody involved. I think that that definitely going through that educational process and figuring that out is really important. It made a big difference. Um, I think from a very practical standpoint, the finances of it are huge. I mean, even if you've got, well, I mean, some cases like the best medical health plans that you might have are going to take care of everything. You don't have to worry about, even $1, or you might have a copay or something, or a $250 deductible in some of the best cases. But for the majority of people out there, you've got some kind of a deductible, a couple $1,000s or something that you're definitely going to have to pay if you have a hospital birth. And so you've got a lot of those out-of-pocket expenses. With an at-home birth, you've got maybe tops like a couple $100s worth of stuff that you really need to have. And if you want to spend another couple $100s on top of that, that's really the expense.
And he's talking from our perspective of having had unassisted births.
Sure, unassisted. Yep.
Right.
And as far as, if you're going to have a midwife assisting and trying to use insurance for that, that can be a lot more difficult. But a lot more midwifery and outfits are doing that in home birth with insurance, and they were able to work with them because it's becoming more readily available in a lot of places. Although there's still some states where it's more difficult. But as far as that goes, even with the midwife, your relative expense is generally going to be lower, but it's not necessarily all about the numbers, because the experience is going to be that much better. So even if it is, okay, well, maybe you're paying a couple $1,000s and it's not through insurance, but you're not meeting your deductible, so you don't get that economic advantage or something. Those couple $1,000 are getting you a much better experience in the long run, and so there's the value there for both you, for your wife, for your family, in the long run, and that's really huge. This is, as I said, this is a really big event in the life of the baby. It's the most important one. It's the biggest event, right? I guess besides the conception, part that happens, but the birth into the world is huge. And if that's not, the best possible experience, then that is an unfortunate beginning. Trauma at birth is not great, and for the mother too, because that emotional bond is really huge. And these are things that I've come to understand through reading and through listening to my wife, who knows a lot about how it all works as well, with the hormones and the way the bonds are created and the importance of those first moments. And it's horrifying to think that, like, my baby's born and all of a sudden there's some goo put on their eyes and they get thrown on a bed and some away from, in a different room from the mother, from my wife, and they're getting measured and whatever, things poked and prodded and all this kind of stuff, like there's some kind of a laboratory cattle or something like that. It's actually horrifying. And that the first thing that they see, smell, taste, touch, experience is not, and which it can happen sometimes in the hospital, but plenty often it doesn't. If it is not, my wife, the baby's mother, and immediately nursing if the baby's ready to do that, if that's not what's happening, that's a huge missed opportunity, because after coming out, that's the most comfortable, safe, familiar place to be, and that's where the baby belongs. And I believe that very firmly, because that's how we were made. That's how all animals, are, really come out. That's they're with their mama right away, and that's where they belong. So separating that just doesn't make any sense unless there's some dire circumstance.
Right.
If there's an emergency, then do something about it. But if there's not, then keep things the way it's supposed to be. And so that's really, I think, at the basis, that's like the most important. Like, this is why it's worth spending a little bit of time to look into it, figure it out, just because this is really the way God created it. It's the way it's been done for thousands of years. This is how we are made, and keeping that as natural as possible is definitely important. And if you look at some statistics and you try and figure out, okay, well, when is it necessary to have a hospital birth? When is it necessary to have a C-section? Which is actually a whole other thing. The prevalence of C-sections that need to happen is significantly, well, it's definitely, there's a whole bunch of numbers about C-sections and how often they're actually required
Yeah, we
versus
did
how
touch on
often
it.
they actually happen. And if my wife doesn't have to get cut open, I certainly don't want her to. But the likelihood of it somehow becoming necessary or deemed medically necessary during a labor in the hospital is incredibly higher than if we're at home and we follow things naturally and we let the body work the way that it's supposed to. Everything's safe, baby's still in there, moving, still a heartbeat, everything's good. Then we don't have anything to worry about. We don't have to panic. We don't have to, cause all these interventions that could get a doctor to say, "Oh, you know what? We might need to cut the baby out." And then if you don't, and if you don't agree, then they're calling the cops because there's a baby's life in danger, according to them, when maybe it just needs a little bit more time, and avoiding that, like that's a hugely important thing. And I'm very grateful that we've never been in a situation where it's been deemed necessary or ever needed to happen. And I hope that very few people ever need to go through that, although certainly it happens.
Well, Sarah brings up the concern of how militant hospitals have become with the C word has made her husband more open to the idea of home births. We lost our baby this year. Very sorry to read that. But I was happy he made that little leap. Yeah, that's really great. And that's why I wanted to do this set of streams too, because I've been hearing this from women that they're like, yeah, I don't want to go give birth to my baby. And we talked about this in the last one too, that, the pictures of women who are wearing masks when their fresh baby is right there, and how we need to see and smell and taste and touch our baby. Yeah. And I said, yes, and taste them. Like, there's a reason why we want to eat our babies because we're biologically wired that way, because it's the hormonal bonding that's there. And when you've got this on covering your face, and this is what your baby sees right away, and you can't take in the smells of your baby can't smell your breath on them, you're not tasting them, they're not tasting you, so that your body knows how you need to make your milk. That's a whole dysfunction right there that we're perpetuating by doing this. And who was it the other day? Well,
I just want to say, we'll get back to whoever it was the other day, but as you were just doing this little, looking down, thing like you do when the baby's born and baby's nursing and baby's there, and you get this incredible beaming smile that she's got on her face, right? Like, it's just, and for me, I'm a little bit of an outsider in the whole process because I'm not giving birth, so I'm not in that moment. I'm out here, I'm keeping the space, I'm doing what I need to do, and but she's in that moment, so I kind of get to follow her lead along that, and I get to see that smile on her face. Well, she's got a mask on that's not there, and so then I lose out on that experience too. Not to mention the fact that I may not even be able to be there if we are not allowed to be there, and whatever restrictions are being imposed. So that's a no way. Get out of here.
Right. We had a friend over the other day, and she was describing, their baby is 8 months old, and she was describing when she had her baby in April, the doctor wanted to give her oxygen because she was just having, her O2 was dipping just a little low, and he's like, okay, let's get you some oxygen. And the nurses wouldn't let her. The nurses like, we can't give her oxygen because of the C word. And the doctor got mad. The doctor was like, what the heck are you talking about? You can't give this laboring woman oxygen. What is your problem? Or making women labor with the mask on. It's just as asinine as not giving women nutrition and water when they're in the middle of this hard work if they need it. I don't personally ever eat when I'm giving birth, but I do drink water, and if somebody were to try to tell me you can't have water, I'd be like, what do you run? I mean, like, I've run a marathon before. You don't run a marathon without drinking water.
Right.
You would die. You would keel over if you didn't drink water running 26.2 miles, and it's the same. If you need to drink water when you're laboring and birthing, you need that. And if a woman needs O2 in the hospital, she should have that, instead of being told, no, we're going to make you reduce it even more by putting this mask on your face. And if you don't wear the mask, we're going to call CPS on you, and you're going to have your baby removed from you right here in the hospital. There's so many cases of this, and people being forced into taking the nasal swab. You know, we talked about this last time too. Being forced into taking the nasal swab in order to even get admitted. You know, that's asinine.
Mhm.
It's asinine. So I'm right there with you. Sorry if I dismissed this call. Totally right there with you, Sarah. And I hear it constantly from women. I get women in my DMs. A woman just DM'd me last week and said that the live stream we had the last time, it was that helped her husband because of the financial end of it, but they had already been talking about it because of the mask issue.
Mhm.
And husband's not being able to be there. I mean, I could not imagine. Oh my gosh, I would burn the place down.
Yeah, that would be crazy if we for some reason had to go to the hospital and then they said that I can't go in. I mean, that's just insane because
Right.
I mean, we're paying to be there, we're paying to use the service, we're paying to and we're healthy, right?
Right.
We're all healthy. The baby's healthy. The baby's not going to catch anything from me or from her that the baby doesn't already have. Like it's it's already there, and so that's not a concern. Like and in fact, like contrary to I don't know what most people would generally think. I mean, if a baby's healthy, the baby's the least worry when it comes to any kind of
Right.
infections or catching a illness or something, because the baby's got all of the immune boosting from mama that is already there through the breastfeeding. Like that's there. Like baby's good. Baby's the least concern. Even though sure they're young and sensitive and all of that, but if the baby was born well, then the baby's going to be more robust than even some of the young children.
Yeah, for sure. And hi to Garrett joining us, the Battery Gang Show. Okay, what's next?
Well, I mean, I think the financial aspect was covered, and that's really important. It can be super inexpensive, of course. And you can do it all on your own for super cheap. You can get a doula instead of a midwife, and that's more of an assistant rather than an actual trained birther, birth assistant,
birth worker,
I don't
midwife,
know, whatever the different terms are necessarily. But
some of the terms bug me, like birth keeper.
Save that one, I guess. I mean, but so that can be a little bit less expensive too if they're comfortable with that, right? Just being there, but not actually being an attending medically trained person, but just being there to kind of help because they know kind of some of the stuff that goes on. But it really is, it's your body. I mean, the baby's going to come out and there it is. It's pretty natural and normal in most circumstances. There's just a few things you need to know how to do right there with the umbilical cord and things like that, which is not really that complicated. It's pretty straightforward stuff. And I don't know, in plenty of hospital births too, the men will do the cord cutting. I guess there's not as much of the preparation for getting that done, but it's pretty straightforward. So financially it can be really easy, but then but yeah, if you're doing it all on your own, super cheap. If you're getting a little bit of help, then that can cost a little bit more, but the value of those dollars spent is huge. So that's a synopsis on the finances.
Okay, what if this is a question that a lot of men end up having, or wives relay about their husbands? What if, or let's do this one first. What about the mess?
Oh, yeah. It's interesting. What about the mess from a men's perspective?
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I was worried about that. I mean, I probably asked that. Well, isn't it like pretty messy? It's not actually that much that comes out. There's not that much of a mess, and so it's pretty simple. There's a shower curtain and a couple of used sheets or something that we usually use, and then there's some special pads that they use in the hospital. They're very absorbent. You get a stack of those. You can order pretty cheap, and they're super absorbent. They work really well. And yeah, you take care of the mess. I mean, it's just like it's there's only so much that's going to come out, and the majority of it, I think, is the baby. And there's a lot of fluids. The placenta's pretty big too, but really the baby is the majority of it. So that one you keep, and then the rest of it you're going to get rid of, or do whatever you do with. You might bury the placenta, which is what we've done. But yeah, it's pretty simple to deal with a mess. If I don't know, if you're a guy that is gonna balk at having to deal with, you know, a mess of bodily fluids, then you're not really well prepared for fatherhood. So, you know, this will be a good preparation for that.
Yeah,
So deal with some mess. But no, it's not horrible. I think.
These are the little, some people call them puppy pads. They're called Chuck's pads.
Yeah.
But people will buy them for, you know, dog training.
So they're super absorbent, and then they have a plastic backing. So, you know, they soak up all the moisture in these, you know, they've got all this kind of woven stuff, and it absorbs.
And it doesn't
really
leak
well.
through.
Yeah. And when you've got that over, you know, shower curtains and sheets and stuff, yeah, you get some mess in different places too, and it's definitely something that has to be cleaned up. But we've never gotten anything on our carpets or anything like that, so it stays, you know, in that absorbency area pretty easily. So that's not too difficult. Yeah, it's not that big of a mess. So don't worry about getting your hands dirty.
Darcy says, Joe never did well with the mess. And some men won't, you know, that's just the way it's going to be. And it is messy. I mean, I think birthing Cecilia was a lot more messy than anybody else has been.
Yeah.
But still the mess. I mean, you had it gone, you know, as soon as I was in bed, he was like, okay, I'm getting this out of here.
Yeah.
You're tucked into bed. You're clean. Okay. Here's the baby. Here's you.
Right.
Bye. I'm going to go put this in the wash.
But she still has a pad because she's still bleeding.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, that's, you know, kind of continued mess. And so that still needs to be managed. And maybe sometimes that does get, you know, through the blanket under the sheet, but that's just blood at that point.
Right. And we double make our beds too. Or our bed when we're going to have like, I guess about 36 weeks is when I start double making the bed. So I put a clean layer of top and bottom sheet, and then I put an old shower curtain that I kept that goes on the bed, and then I put the sheets that we're presently going to sleep on top of it. And so for the first couple of days, while, you know, I'm still postpartum, those whatever sheets are on top of that shower curtain, that's what's going to be there. And that's going to kind of help protect things too. So
unless the water broke while we were in bed, which is kind of the reason to do that ahead of time. So it's just a precaution, you know, at home, which, I mean, would be practical even if you're not planning a home birth, but also if you are.
Sarah says, tell husbands that cleaning up the mess just saved you $10K.
Yeah.
It's a very good point.
Right. Yeah. Definitely a better wage than most mess cleaners get, for sure. Or even I mean, at the end of the day, like, yeah, you'd be essentially getting paid way more than what the nurses get paid to clean up the mess in the hospital, you know, at that point, for the money you're saving and the time you're saving and everything. And it's just a little bit of money on, you know, a few disposable, you know, pads and stuff. It's not a big deal.
I'll show you really quick. This is just about everything that I keep in the initial birth kit, aside from, you know, all the receiving blankets that we use and the plastic sheeting and stuff. So you saw the Chuck's pads, and I showed you guys this last time, and I turned it on when I got my batteries. It is 3 megahertz, the Doppler.
Is that high or low?
That's pretty low.
All right.
And I looked it up, and I can't remember now what the hospital Dopplers are, but they're a lot higher than this one. I've got just a standard stethoscope. It's got the pediatric and the adult sides, a blood pressure cuff. And I know how to take my own blood pressure. It's really not that difficult once you learn how to do it. But I've also started training Zoe on how to do it. I haven't taught you how to do it yet.
Well, I don't know. I think you walked me through it. I don't think I've ever actually done it.
Sure. I keep some, I've got a massage roller in here.
I didn't know that was in there.
I've got some iodine.
Disinfectant.
And I've got, let's see, for right away after birth, I've got, these are just milk pads. I gotta dig in here.
Do you use those?
I do it right away, yeah.
Oh.
I beef. And then I've got these hydrogel pads for when your breasts are hurting.
Super
cool. Well, I didn't want to brand.
Saw what that was.
They're brand.
Oh, is that
I didn't want to brand.
Okay.
So they're just hydrogel pads and they get cool. You cool them.
What do you do with? Oh, for hemorrhoid issues?
No, for your breasts.
Oh.
And then I've got these are my umbilical cord scissors.
See, I don't need to know everything. Like,
but people do ask me these things.
Well, no, I know, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know everything about it all. You don't have to be an expert to be a supportive husband of home birth. You know? I don't have to know all the details of all the stuff.
No, I know. But people always want to know what I've got in there, and that's basically what I keep in there. I do also put in some herbal tinctures. My chat disconnected here.
Yeah, this disconnected for a moment, and then it said we were live again. It was like 3.5 seconds, so I don't know.
Oh, our internet is
what's going on.
Being wonky.
Is it our Wi-Fi?
Yeah. Hang on a second. We're gonna connect to our other Wi-Fi here really quick. We've got 2 Wi-Fi. Maybe somebody tripped over something downstairs. There we go. Okay, no. So yeah, I like to just let people know this is what I use. I do keep different herbal tinctures on hand. I in the last couple of days, once I sense I'm like, oh yeah, probably happening pretty soon, I start using blue and black cohosh tinctures to just help that last bit of ripening. There's mixed reviews about using blue and black cohosh. I was taught by Susan Weed. She's a herbalist, hippie, pagan lady who lives out west. And I learned all of my herbalism via her. And I trust it. I've always used, 6 of my children, I've used blue and black cohosh in the last week or so of pregnancy. And I'm totally comfortable using it. It's just up to you, what you want to use for herbals, and teach yourself about them. You have to learn. You can't just go on the advice of whoever, you have to actually learn about it. And I do keep motherwort too, because that helps clamp down the uterus and expel the placenta.
So that's right after the baby's born.
Yeah, like within 30 seconds to a minute, I'm usually dropping some motherwort on my tongue. Let's see here. Garcia family says, yeah, we were buffering. Massage roller, awesome. Wish I would have thought of that. Darcy said, yeah, it's nice. I've only used it, I think, once. I think just Cecilia was the last time, or the only time I've really used it. If I need pressure or rubbing or something somewhere, I'm just really direct about it and just tell him, can you please push here, rub here, or okay, stop rubbing, or I need socks on.
Yep.
And he does it. And I think all of those kind of things are really vital. Instead of, I don't mean this to sound towards you. I don't mean this to sound mean towards other husbands, but I feel like it really abdicates that. What's your Avad and Shamar? Are those your words?
Avad and Shamar.
Avad and Shamar.
I think it's a V. Yeah, it's ancient Hebrew.
Which means?
To till and to guard.
To till and to guard.
And to guard.
And I really think that being in the hospital environment and having the nurses do everything and having the doctors do everything, the husband is really giving away his role in being there for his wife as they're bringing their baby out. And so having him here and just like doing everything I ask him to do and not doing anything I don't ask him to do is really important. And it really builds those trust bonds. And I think that it also aids toward not having those angry fights that people often have after a baby is born, or the feelings of resentment, or the feelings of disconnect from one another after you have a baby, because you're there and interactive. I mean, you were there and interactive when the baby was made.
Sure.
I don't know why you wouldn't be there and interactive when the baby's being born.
Yeah.
It just makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, and I guess it makes sense that some of that I don't know, because I do feel like as much as as much as it's not me going through that process, I'm very actively involved. And it's not just cutting the cord, that I participate in. I'm involved in kind of helping to make sure that all different stuff is happening, including making sure that the children are behaving and
Right.
everything.
And they always are. It's funny. I think it was Henri's birth, his birth video. Every time I watch it, I laugh because you can tell I'm in transition because everybody's like perfectly quiet. And we used to have a 4-poster bed in here. Everybody's perfectly quiet, and I'm like hanging on one of the posts of the bed, and I'm like just got off of a contraction, and the children are all sitting there quiet, and just like you can sense that there's like in the video, you can sense that there's just this quiet anticipation. And I'm like, everybody be quiet. Like, they're perfectly quiet. I laugh every single time. But so he doesn't have to tell the children, hey, calm down, your mom's.
Well, I do have to manage a little bit, but she doesn't have to worry about it because I'm taking care of it. Yeah, sometimes they get a little bit, bouncy or whatever.
Right.
Just because it can take a little while. But yeah, I mean, but I'm there and I'm really active in the whole process, and I think that's really important. But I can see how not being active and not having that sense of involvement and also I guess in the context of a hospital birth, just feeling completely out of control of anything that's going on, even though this is like what pretty much it's the first baby, like the most important aspect of your family life at that point, really is like we're actually family with baby at this point. That's really big. And now the role of fatherhood starts, and that's huge. And if you're not really involved in that instance, that's going to make the ensuing months even more difficult too, because that's mother baby bonding time most of the time. There's not a whole lot necessarily that dad needs to do with baby in those first months. It's really mother nursing, resting with the baby. I mean, they sleep half or more of the day, both of them, after the baby's born for quite a while, because there's a lot of resting and recuperation because they both went through all that physical ordeal together. And so, it's take care of the rest of the kids, or, do the cleaning, take care of the dishes and the cooking, and just make sure that everything is managed. And yeah, that's definitely a change, but it's important. But it's a lot easier when you know that you were a big part of the whole process all along. And and then just understanding that that's the role too, is right now just making sure that everything goes the way that it's supposed to, and that mother and baby get their nutrition. Baby gets what baby needs through mama, and so I just have to feed mama and make sure that mama feels good.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit in the last one too. Like during the birth process, it's the mother and the baby, and she's in her world right there. She's doing everything she can in this space, and the husband needs to be in this space, just like guarding and protecting and doing what she needs. And in the hospital situation, I mean, men are victim of it too. They're victim of that mindset that the hospital's in charge, that the doctors are in charge, and so they don't advocate for their wives, and that's when she really needs you to. If you do end up choosing a hospital, like that's what you need, is that advocate, and that's who he should be for me always, but especially then. And advocating for the protection of his family, and not pushing what she doesn't want. Sarah says hovering. Yeah, it's a hovering, but it's not like that invasive sense of hovering. It's that present witness almost, and then he catches most of the time.
Yeah, Liliana was uncatchable.
Yeah, she was uncatchable because she was just like bullet train. The kid was fast.
That was impressive.
Vanessa says, what do you think about for Sarah, do we know if we're having a boy or a girl? One of the two.
Yes. No, we never know. We actually haven't been to a doctor at all or anything. Certainly aren't planning to get a sonogram if we don't need to. There was only one that we actually did get.
Two.
Oh, we did get two.
Okay. Cecilia did. because I had an accident with her too.
Oh, right. Okay. So yeah, there was a car accident. They were minor, but just to make sure. So there were sonograms with both of them. But no, we haven't known. Well, actually, we didn't know either with Cecilia or with Gabriel what they were. But yeah, no, we'd rather not know.
Yeah, we didn't ask. They asked me, "Do you want to know?" And I was like, "No."
Right.
In both cases, Travis wasn't even there, so I would have felt horrible making the decision, without him anyway. Sarah says, "Yeah, there's only two." You're right. There's only two options. Vanessa says, "What do you think about a birth center with midwives? Is that better than the hospital, or is it kind of the same? I want to have a home birth, but I'm scared." It depends on the birth center.
Yeah.
If it's an independent midwife-run birth center, definitely better than a hospital. If it's a birth center that's attached to a hospital and coyly covered in a veneer of a home birth,
Yeah.
like Atmosphere Birth Center, like we've got 2 of them in Minnesota here.
Yeah.
Avoid that.
Yeah. It really does. Like I was just thinking about this. It really just seems like another way, because usually they're headed up by doctors who just want to make a different experience. Well, I don't know. Honestly, that just feels like a lot of over commercialization of birth is really what, like, in that sense, it really does feel like it. I think the midwifery centers are really just trying to make it very accessible and easy, and so they've, of necessity, in this medicalized society, had to kind of adapt and create more networks and stuff so that they can process insurance. So they've got a little bit more overhead and stuff like that, because it takes administrative power to do that, but then it's more accessible to more people when they have those set up that way. And that can be a much different experience, but I think that you're more likely to get a lot of the same results if you're using one of those hospital adjacent birth centers that are really just led by doctors that are already in the same hospital process. And if you read like that Ina May Gaskin book in particular, and there might have been one other book that was particularly helpful too that I can't remember the name of right now, but about home birth, childbirth, midwifery, and that was really instructive in just kind of breaking down some of the differences and really the statistics, like what are the outcomes of hospital births versus non, and also where do hospital births happen? Well, it's really only in the U.S., not the rest of the world. And the World Health Organization, I think, still generally recommends less invasive hospital births, and not inducing labors, and really just normal
C-section rates,
normal midwifery births, and all of those other countries and places where more home births and more natural midwifery attended births are so much more the norm than the U.S. The rates of C-sections and other birth defects and other things like that are going to be lower.
Yeah. Darcy says, "My sister had hers with a midwife at a hospital separated from the OBs, so she made sure that the doctors left her alone. But Tasha's right, it all depends on your midwife." And there's a distinction between a midwife and a medwife. And the medwife is really who you in my opinion, who you want to avoid. If you want to have that autonomy and your control over your birth, etc., you want to avoid the medwife. And you want to go with a midwife. And so that's why I would be concerned about the birth centers that are attached to hospitals, because it's just the chances of you having a midwife are really big in those instances. And now in general, though, like I said in the last stream, I think that I'm a strong advocate for home birth. I think that women should give birth at home if you are able to. And that's most women. Statistically, that's most women. If you decide for whatever reason that you don't want to give birth at home, I think that women need to have full information about hospital situations, about birth centers attached to hospitals, about birth centers that are independently run, midwives. I mean, you just need to have the whole gambit of information so that you can actually make informed decisions for yourself. And so that's second to my advocacy of home birth. Well, I mean, primarily my advocacy is always for bodily autonomy. And I don't mean bodily autonomy in the sense that my body, my choice, like those people. I mean, this is my body and my baby, and I'm going to make the decision about who I give birth with, where I give birth with, what's done to me and my baby, etc. And depending on the environment that you're in, is what you're going to get for that end. Am I saying that right? Like, kind of tripping over my words there, but I think you get it.
Yep.
I want people to be
make
informed, make the decisions based on all of the information available, rather than the. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. We are having an internet issue.
We went to mobile. Wi-Fi's acting up, I guess.
Yeah. So, what was I saying?
So you were talking about the bodily autonomy and advocating for yourself. And then you closed that thought.
Yeah, close that thought, but I was saying something else though. I don't remember what it was now. Okay, so we'll go to Sarah. Sarah said, I wanted to address for his Garcia family. You're in Minnesota. DM me on Twitter. Let's connect. I want to find out where you're at. Sarah says, I was blessed that the 4 times I gave birth in a hospital, I only needed a midwife and they were all respectful of my needs and space. It isn't always the case. You must be assertive if need be. Absolutely. And I've heard a lot of people say the same, that it's been a really positive experience for them. And I love hearing that, because I don't want to 100% dog on the medical field or the obstetric field. That's what I was going to say. There's a long history of vilifying midwifery. And anytime when we talked about this, anytime a baby dies in a home birth, they're just really quick to blame the fact that it was a home birth, when so often that's not the reason why the baby died. The reason the baby died is often congenital, and something that even ultrasounds that they had didn't get picked up on, or something that even doctors in a hospital wouldn't have picked up on. So it's like that really sad story, the beginning of all of the C word issues, the baby that died. They said the baby died of it. Well, the baby didn't die of the C word. The baby died because he had his intestines out of his body, and it wasn't observable on the ultrasound. That's why the baby died. It wasn't because of this other thing. So it's very similar in that it's not because the baby was born at home. It's because this other thing happened that nobody could have foreseen. I have a good friend who almost went to prison for the rest of her life because of a congenital defect in a baby in a home birth that she was attending as a midwife. And this happens very often. Let's see here. Garcia family says, I had the same with my first 4, Darcy. 1/4 was a midwife, or one of the 4 was a midwife. 2 was far too hippie for me. Then had an OB with the last and couldn't find one to birth in a hospital. Yeah, Garcia family, no Twitter. I have got email. You can email me at Tasha Rose Radmama, MAMA, at Gmail. So that's our Radical Mothering email address. Darcy says, thankfully, she was a true mid and not med. Their state passed a law that midwives were no longer allowed to use birthing centers, so she had no choice but to move to the hospital. And that's part of the vilification of midwives.
Yeah.
Are these different laws that get passed. And so
it makes it difficult.
Yeah, it makes it really difficult to make these decisions, because they put these roadblocks in place when, I mean, personally, I said this in the last stream, I am so against the licensure and regulation. Like, I think it should just be a deregulated, leave it alone. Women know how to do this, and women have been doing this for all of human history.
Right.
So leave us alone. Yeah. We got this figured out. And I mean, I just can't imagine giving birth and then somebody saying, oh, well, that was illegal. No.
Right.
No. Let's see here. Sarah says, I fear doctors more than midwives, unless they are pharma tyrants. Yeah, I definitely fear doctors. I mean, not fear them, but I don't trust them more than I don't trust even midwives. I did want to say, I made sure to tell somebody, okay, you are hidden from this channel. Goodbye, Jonathan. so I recommended to a friend who is trying, she and her husband are trying for a baby right now, and she's worried about all of this. She's like, well, what are we going to do if? And I said, well, because she's had 2 high risk pregnancies already that were legitimately high risk. And so she feels she needs to stick with going to an OB. I said, well, why don't you check with your OB? If you trust your OB, he's a Catholic. He's, she'll give me all this whole list of what her doctor is. So why don't you check with him and see if he'll do a house call? Because I know that we have Catholic doctors up at the Catholic Family Clinic up here that will make house calls. So it's very likely if you have a rapport with a doctor and you have that conversation with him or her, they might come to you rather than you going to them, and then you can birth in your home and feel confident with the obstetric end of it if you're not quite confident going at it with a midwife. Let's see. I don't know how to ban people. I just want to ban him entirely. I've got a couple of, sorry if you guys are seeing really troll people in the chat. They're just awful. I guess that means I'm doing good things, right? Garcia family, I bet we go to the same clinic. Very, very possible. Very possible. Any other questions that you guys have or anything you want to mention right now?
Let's see. So, yeah, well, I mean, I think that whole idea of Ad and Shamar, that what God directed Adam to do is to till and to guard the soil, right? And that was, and then he also gave Eve to Adam, right? And there's a huge duty there, and I know that our friend Garrett actually mentioned this the other night on his show, and I think that should have been mentioned right at the beginning of the show. I think it's really important because it is a duty. It's a duty that men have to show up and to be involved and to take an active role in the lives of their families and with their wives. And I think that's really huge. And so being really involved in it and being willing to step up and if at least, at the end of the day, the answer is we're not going to have a home birth, have a very clear understanding of what the reasons that the hospital birth seem to make more sense than a home birth or a midwife center or whatever. Just be able to actually know that you've got the information. And it takes work to figure it out and to put it all together, but it's really important to know what was best for your family and to know that you did the right thing, that took the right steps to understand that fully, rather than just some kind of a knee-jerk reaction about, I'm not a doctor, so I can't do it. Just because that's just another lie that modern culture has putting in place that's really in large part facilitates a downfall of the family in society, which is denigrating our society as a whole for decades now, and it's a really bad thing. So really trying to make sure that we're not being a part of that downfall of society, if we can avoid it, that's the whole point. Like that's our job, really.
Right.
To stand up and to recognize what we can do to make sure that the world is a better place for our families and that our family is stronger, for the decisions that we make and not somehow weaker or not better off. So I think that's the really important overarching concept here. You had another question about this side of it.
Okay. So I said the
initially.
mess, and then I said, okay. So then the husband says, or the husband says to the wife, "What if there's an emergency?"
Oh, well, that's why you call 911 if there's an emergency.
Right. Okay.
Right. And I don't know enough about all of the emergencies, and that's something that that I haven't felt. Generally speaking, being fearful of what might happen in a natural process is not what I'm called to do, because I'm supposed to be trusting God, right? And so there's a natural process. I'm trying to do things in a natural way, in the way that is normal. And I think, kind of to the initial question about fear, the fear of the pain or the fear of, whatever, well, it's all a natural process. And so it's about trusting, and that fear of all of the pain and, that you just can't do it. Well, look, it's only been like 100 years that all of these pain meds and all these interventions in hospital births have been a norm and available. So before that, I mean, how did anybody get by if it's not possible to get through, right?
Right.
So it's a lie that society tells you, like, that you have to be afraid of it. Same thing with, well, what if there's an emergency? Yes, that's what the doctors want you to think, so that you're going to go and use their centers so that they can continue. And yes, it's not that, hospitals don't do good things and don't provide a lot of great services to everybody, but in some cases they may not be necessary. And I don't think that there's anything in anything new or newsworthy about the idea that maybe not everything that the medical profession and the insurance industry and everything has built up in society is all that is cracked up to be. I think everybody's got a certain level of skepticism about that. Some people a lot higher than others. Some people are a lot more trusting of it, but there's certainly a reason to be skeptical of all of that, and to challenge a little bit that fear of, what if there's an emergency? Okay, what if there is an emergency? Well, you're going to do what you can to deal with it, but most of the time there's not an emergency, and that's the most important thing. Most of the time there's not, and so it's a relatively irrational fear to say, well, I'm going to completely drastically change the natural process that God has given for our family to make babies, because of some minuscule potential chance that there might be something unexpected that comes up. And so we are called to trust God in that, and not to cause any undue and unnecessary interventions, which can have more negative effects. So I think that would be my strong answer for that. What if there's an emergency? Well, what if there's not, right? Which most of the time there won't be. So that's the bigger question.
Right. So those are basically the questions that people always pose at me is what if there's an emergency? What do you tell your husband about that? And then what do you recommend that husbands find out for themselves without their wives having to dig up the information for them? What do they need to know going into it, or even if they're thinking about it and their wife just proposed the idea and he's like, okay, well, she's going to get her information, I'm going to do some digging too. What do you recommend they look at?
Yeah, I mean, I think really that that cursory glance at some of the different statistics around hospital births versus non-hospital births, and looking at more the global numbers rather than just from the United States, because the United States is very highly over medicalized when it comes to birth compared to most other even developed first world countries. It's really not common to do hospital births. Most of them are much more at home and midwifery based processes, even still, and I think probably even more so still in Europe, in the UK, and that kind of stuff.
Not necessarily the UK. I had somebody comment on the other live stream. They do have a lot more home births in the UK than we do here. Okay. But it is still all monitored by the NHS. So it's still very medicalized. Garcia family says, good point. You don't need to know all the things. That is what 911 is for. And unfortunately, yes, I'm not so great at trusting. And yeah, that is what 911 is for. And I am the type that does need to know all the things. Like I have to know all the things about all of this. And so I do always have that running list in my head. Okay, what to check for when a baby's born, and because I've done this so many times, just myself and with attending other families, running through the checklist of baby when they're born. And then secondarily or simultaneously, really, I run through the checklist of what I need also. So I need to take my, make sure I take my magnesium, and make sure I take my motherwort, and make sure my blood pressure stays good, and make sure that Travis and the older girls know that if I start talking funny, or if I complain of dizziness, that's a reason to call 911, stuff like that. So we have that little checklist that I keep going at all times. And I did recommend those couple of books, Anne Fry's Holistic Midwifery and the Varney's Midwifery textbook. to have on hand. Those are my everything I need to know books. So I really recommend those if you are similar to me, where it really bothers you if you don't know things. Sarah says, dim lights, safe environment, etc. help with pain too. The sterile environment, bright lights in a hospital can stop the labor hormones from working as well. That's actually factual. Yeah. That's scientifically factual.
And I guess to the point of, those couple of books, I would be more intimately familiar with those books if I didn't know that you were incredibly familiar with those, as well as having attended, hundreds of births.
Right.
So so fathers definitely, or men definitely, encourage you to read those texts as well, because you should be on board and understand what the process is, and kind of, okay, well, this is what to expect when the baby comes out, and this is what needs to happen, leading into it and afterward, and that kind of stuff, just because there's a lot to it. But it really can go super quick. And I mean, with Henri, I think that one was like the most impressive. It was like, 5 o'clock he was born, and we had pizza delivered by 7:30, and it was sweet. And she stayed in bed, but everybody, I think we may have eaten pizza in here. I don't know.
Yeah, we did.
Maybe the kids ate. Okay, we
all did. Yeah. Yep, we had a pizza picnic on the bed.
Yeah, and it was super simple, straightforward, real easy. And I mean, just all the little steps that happen in between, just happen real smooth.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our third at that point. So, definitely a little bit more in the swing, but it only gets easier and better.
Yeah. I do want to recommend, I see a lot of women like struggling at the very end. I'm sorry, I got an eyelash being funny here. Struggling at the very end, like just really uncomfortable, and like they're going through prodromal labor. Prodromal labor is that, and as you have more babies, you kind of learn what the prodromal labor is versus what Braxton Hicks contractions are versus what false labor is. Prodromal labor carries on for weeks, like 3-4 weeks, if you are one who has prodromal labor like I do. Mm-hmm. And if you have shorter labors at the end game, chances are you probably had weeks of prodromal labor ahead of time, because your body's getting you really, really prepared to push baby out. Get a yoga ball, or big exercise ball. I think that's basically the only thing I sit on in the last 4 or 5 weeks of being pregnant, because it helps loosen, you open up your hip space and drop baby down and ripen your cervix. You just sit, whatever you're doing, just sit. If you're in a living room, if you're mentioned in the last live stream, I'm usually in here. Like, this is my home base the last couple of weeks of pregnancy. I just don't want to leave my bedroom. Mm-hmm. And so the whole home operation just happens out of here. And I just sit on my yoga ball. I've got my bed and put my laptop on the bed, and I just do everything in here, and I'm bouncing on my yoga ball almost constantly. And that's really going to help you out. And it's also really, it doesn't seem like it's going to be, but it's really relieving on a lot of back pressure that you get at the end of pregnancy too. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because I get asked a lot about that. And your husband needs to be understanding. If you do the things like I do, like you just want to be in your room, you want to be in your little nest, he's got to understand that you still have to run your house, but you can do it from here, or you can do it from, if you want to stay just on your sofa for or in your living room for the last few weeks, or whatever it is that you need to do. He needs to, I think he needs to honor that and be like, yeah, okay. As long as you're not being like a bum or anything, sure. You're doing what you need to do to have your baby.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, like, things get more difficult as the pregnancy progresses, and she's more and more uncomfortable, being pregnant. But also, that's also part of the deal.
Yeah, that's part of the deal.
It's part of the deal. So it's it's difficult, but then I mean, I step up, incrementally, mm-hmm. as I need to as well, and taking more of an active role.
Yeah, and you already have in this pregnancy, because this is sure. baby 8. And I'm going to be 41 in a week and a half. And I'm just like, I've been really tired.
Coming up.
Pretends like he doesn't know that.
Oh no. All right. Wish me luck.
I was really, really very tired, the most tired I've ever been at the beginning of this pregnancy. So I guess I'm going to segue into just a really quick pregnancy update because we're almost at 20 weeks. The end of this week will be 19. Um, uh, really, really, really tired, like could not function at the beginning of this pregnancy. I'd wake up, I'd make an omelet, and I would be done for the day. Like I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't homeschool the children. I was exhausted and ready to go to sleep for the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
It was nuts. And then the nausea hit and it was really rough. And then I finally turned the corner in 20 weeks. But then just this past week, like pregnant really happened. Like
Yeah.
I started the waddle, like the belly really came out. Like I already had the belly pop, but it really popped out this week. And I'm just like, really, am I only 20 weeks pregnant? I look a lot more pregnant than that. Are you sure there's only one baby in there? I'm pretty sure there's only one baby in there. I've only found one heartbeat. So one heartbeat and one placental heartbeat. So I'm pretty sure there's only one. But so already, and it's already a little bit more difficult to stand in front of the sink and do some dishes or stand up and cook dinner or whatever. I have to sit down a lot more already in this pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's really popped out all of a sudden. It's usually like 25 weeks, closer to 30 weeks before I really get a belly, really noticeable belly.
Well, noticeable plenty soon, as actually noticeable, but as far as like really sticking out and in the way,
right?
This is
relatively
early.
And heavy. Like it's that very heavy feeling that, oh yes, definitely occupied by this other person right now. Really, really happened this past week. And I noticed that like there was so much other Christmas baking that I wanted to do and I didn't do it because I couldn't. I just did not have the energy to do it because my back hurt so bad from standing and cooking and baking and making icing and just all of this,
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's already stepping up the game a little bit and doing more. I think doing dishes, and that's another that's a whole different conversation though, because some of that has to do with willful children not wanting to do their chores. So
there's that too. Yeah. Yeah, they can be tough. So Darcy has a good book recommendation.
Okay. Good. There's a book called Unassisted Home Birth and Active Love by Lynn Greismer. Great read for anyone considering home birth. I agree. And also I'll echo, this was in comments. I think it was on the other video, or it was on my Twitter. I can't remember. Somebody asked about books about unassisted childbirth. And I said, the book Unassisted Childbirth by Laura Shanley. That was the very first book I ever read about unassisted birth. And I was just captivated, completely captivated. She became a mentor to me. When I was still on Facebook, I ended up finding her years ago on Facebook, and she's like, "Oh, I'm so glad you found me." And I was like, "Yay!" And we talked about how many more babies I'd had since I talked to her last, and so Laura Shanley's book, she had I think 8 or 9, don't quote me, unassisted home births. She did have a baby die, but again, that was not anything that was going to be found out anyway. Mm-hmm. The likelihood would have died in hospital as well. Unassisted home birth and active love, and Unassisted Home Birth by Laura Shanley.
Ready? What did you say? Unassisted childbirth.
Unassisted childbirth. Sorry, Unassisted childbirth by Laura Shanley. Sarah says, "Good night, Sarah." And yes, thank you, Darcy, for that recommendation. I'm gonna just catch up on these comments here. Baby and a pizza, Garcia. Yeah, that's what we do. I need pizza. It's usually Pizza Luce. But they're kind of
maybe not. We don't like them as much right now.
Yeah, we don't like them as much right now. I don't know. Sarah and Garcia family both get prodromal labor, and I think both of you said you have really short active labors too. So that's what I've experienced as a midwife and whatnot. That the chances of prodromal labor, or having prodromal labor, indicates that you're probably going to have a shorter labor.
That's good. Yeah. So. Yeah, and I wonder if maybe psychologically something happens too as you're preparing to have a home birth versus a hospital birth, where your body's like more comfortable practicing and more likely to do
Yeah.
prodroma beforehand anyways, perhaps. I guess I don't know. But
Maybe.
because you're already in the space where your mind is planning to give birth, so your body knows that, and so then that's maybe more likely that it's all more preparational, because obviously there's always the whole nesting process too that happens, and cleaning the space up and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's all a very interesting process. I can't imagine trying to plan to go into the hospital. And I mean, we're in the city, right? We're not like, rural or anything. That would be even crazier to think about having to make it. And we got cousins down in Georgia, and they're pretty rural.
I told them
They've never made it to that. I mean, like once or twice. They've got like 6 kids now, five kids. Like twice they made it to the hospital.
Once, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Once, and then like one was in the entryway at the hospital. The other one was at the gas station on the way to the hospital. She needed some ice, so they stopped for some ice at the Quickie Mart. And out came the baby. And it's just like yeah, I can't imagine trying to get any significant distance, but just like all of that, and then the kids, they have to be dealt with too, and then they're not a part of it because they're not at the hospital, or maybe they are, but they're in the waiting room. It's just like it's a whole weird experience.
I think that you bring up the kids, and that's a really good point. That if your children aren't there in the hospital with you, and say you've got younger children, like Cecilia is going to be just over 2 when the baby comes, and she, she's like, you say, Cecilia, where's mama's baby? And she'll point to my belly, and she's like, so she's starting to understand it, but she doesn't quite get it. No. She's not 2 yet. Like, she doesn't know that there's actually a baby in there,
right.
But we're preparing her that there's going to be a baby,
Yeah.
And so when she gets to see me be in labor and see the baby come out, that understanding is going to be there right away. And we talked about that a little bit last week too, like just the making sure that children are just informed of the process from the start, from the beginning of hang on, getting rid of another troll here. So yeah, making them just, and I think that reduces a lot of confusion, and it reduces a lot of regressive kind of behaviors too with the younger, older children. At least that's what I don't have anything to base it on other than having had home births, and then knowing people who've had hospital births multiple times, and they bring the baby home, or the big older siblings come and meet the baby in the hospital, and they're like, yay baby, but then they bring the baby home, and there's lots of regression and behaviors and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess it's probably hard for a young child to understand that baby's part of the family necessarily if they didn't see the baby come out. I guess that's an interesting point.
Right.
Never would have thought of that too much. I mean, I was like 3.5 when my younger sister came along. So I guess I kind of had an understanding at that point. So that was a little bit different. My first younger sibling. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point that could cause some issues with family dynamics. Like, oh, now there's some new kid randomly here.
Right.
And then eventually you figure out that it's part of your family, but that takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good. Anyways, I think that we are going to wrap it up. We're at an hour and a half here, and I don't know how many of these trolls you guys are seeing on your end, but they're annoying. Why don't you just stop being a bunch of misogynists and move on?
I think it was 3.
Yeah, well, that's 3 too many.
Yeah, no, it was interesting.
I just delete you. Like, say whatever you want. I don't care. I'm gonna delete you.
Right.
So if you are new here, I would love for you to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. And we're going to try, like, his schedule gets kind of crazy with work, but we're going to try to do a weekly live stream. I'm not gonna make any promises.
No.
But we're going to make an effort.
Yes.
So sometimes it might be just me, and sometimes It'll be both of us.
Okay.
But it's going to be an effort anyway. So it was a great talk. Thank you for all your questions. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to drop them in the comments after the video processes, or you can find me on Twitter. I am still reluctantly on Instagram. I've turned off all permissions on Instagram when I'm not using the app. So I'm reluctantly there right now. We'll see how that goes. Let's see. Darcy says, make some of your viewers moderators and they can delete them too. Good idea. I will do that. I'll do that the next live stream. That's a good plan. But thank you very much for the conversation. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to hit us up on Twitter, in the comments, in the community tabs. Happy to answer them. And again, this is our experience and what we would do.
Mm-hmm.
And the encouragement is really to just explore all of your options fully. And if there are fears, figure out what you need to do to allay those fears. If it's your husband's, if it's an adverse opinion from your husband, well, lay out your argument and give it to him, because you have to be able to trust each other. And if you're too afraid to come to him with your desired home birth, that's a trust issue, and that's something that really needs to be addressed. So yeah,
Yes,
just figure out what you need to do to allay your fears, and just read and research everything that you possibly can on the issues, on the avenues that you can take, etc., and make your decisions for yourself. And just remember that you're the boss. You're the boss of you, not a doctor, not a hospital, not a midwife. You're the boss, because it's your body and it's your baby. So that's my synopsis. Do you have any closing words?
Well, yeah, just I mean, make sure that the decision that's being made is the best one. I mean, there's a lot to look at, to really look one way or another, but just make sure the decision that gets made is made with full understanding, and not just made for you by what specific segment of the medical community is necessarily advising, or what even your family thinks you should do, or whatever. It's like get the information and know the information for yourself on what's going to be the best decision for your family, because that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, definitely if the wife or the husband thinks that one way or the other is better, and there's not a really thorough investigation into both options, then that's going to be a big problem, because you definitely have to look into it much more further if there's a specific desire one way or the other. And I mean, yeah, I was somewhat trepidatious to begin with, and questioning, well, okay, but I mean, is it really better, safer, not a problem, all that kind of stuff without help? And just read a few books, and had an open mind about it, and it just made a lot of sense. Like, it just really does. But you definitely have to come at it with an open mind, understanding that we only get a little bit of the picture, and there's a lot more to it out there. Yeah.
Well, good words. And Sarah says it's good hearing a male perspective. Precisely why I wanted you to come on for a part 2 of this. All right, well, we'll close this up. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Christmastide, and we'll see you maybe next week.
Maybe next week.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye.